Hi, Tom here with one way to draw a bridge in one-point perspective. First, draw a horizontal line above the middle of your page, and then draw a dot on the right for the vanishing point, where receding lines which are parallel will go towards. Next, draw a diagonal line from the vanishing point towards the left-hand side of your paper, and then another diagonal line from the vanishing point to the base of your paper. Between these two diagonal lines that are receding towards the vanishing point, we can draw the side column of one part of the bridge. And then we can draw two more vertical lines for the further distant side column of the bridge. Between these two sets of vertical lines, we can draw two more lines going towards the left from the base for an indication of the thickness of the bridge. And then using the vanishing point, we can draw a receding line from the left-hand side of these new lines which show the thickness of the bridge. At the point where the receding line touches the thickness of the bridge, we can draw two more vertical lines to show the left-hand side of the pillars of the bridge. Next, we can extend these lines as guidelines to find the top left corner of each of the pillars of the bridge. And then from these top left corners, we can draw another diagonal, another receding line going to the vanishing point for the left-hand side top part of the bridge. The next step is to find the middle between the two pillars, and for this we draw a cross, and where the cross meets, draw a guideline as a vertical line going up, and then we can mark where we want the top of the curve of the bridge to be on this vertical line. Next, we can draw a curved arch from one end to the other, using the guidelines and the center line for the center of the space of which the arch will bridge. Next, we can draw a couple of guidelines towards the left to find the left-hand side of where the arch will be in position. So we're using the same guidelines that we used for the right-hand side of the arch to find the curve for the left-hand side of the arch, which is a repeat of the right-hand side of the arch. So now we have a wireframe drawing of an arch in one-point perspective receding towards the vanishing point, which is on the far right. Next, we can extend the vertical lines a little bit and draw another arch above the first arch to indicate the thickness of the sides of the bridge, which will be thicker, I think, on the right-hand side, and on the left-hand side we might not show that so much, but for now we'll draw it as a guideline. Then we can darken some of the lines so that we can see which lines are most useful for the drawing. So now we can draw the far left-hand side of the top of the bridge as the arch, using the same top central guideline, and then creating a curve that looks similar to the first arch that we drew. And then we could draw a horizontal line for the top zenith point of the arch. Then we can double up some of the lines to create a thickness, like this could be a barrier or a fence on the side of the bridge. And again, because these are parallel lines and receding, all receding parallel lines will go towards our vanishing point on the right. So now we have the basic structure of the bridge. In the foreground on the left, we can draw another line which is receding towards the vanishing point on the right. Now for this guideline, we can draw a mark for another curve of another arch for the bridge, and then just pencil that in. So this will be a lower arch to the bridge. Now where it rises from the base of the column on the left hand side, we can repeat that curve on the left hand side, so we have the thickness of the bridge. And then on the right hand side towards the vanishing point, we can draw another upright for the bridge, and then divide the space between the two uprights with a cross, and then a guideline vertical line. And then within this shape of guidelines, we can carefully draw another arch for the third arch of the bridge, going away in the distance. So the third arch is the same size as the arch on the far left, but because it's further away, it looks smaller, whereas the arch in the middle of the bridge is larger than the two arches either side, just because it's a bigger arch. Next, on the bases of the pillars, we could extend these to left and right, and then we could draw a semicircle at either end. And then from these, we could draw vertical lines going downwards to extend the pillars of the bridge further downwards, which will raise the bridge. So we don't need to raise the bridge. We can make the bridge seem taller by extending it, by extending the vertical lines going downwards. And then the shape of the top of the pillars, we can repeat these at a lower point to show where they finish, where they stop. And these will also be in line with the vanishing point on the right, because they're receding in the same direction. Then we can start to add a line on the right hand side away from the bridge to show the bank between the land and the water from which the bridge is spanning. Next, darken the lines that we need, and then we can start to add some more details. For the front curve of the bridge, I'll double up the line. And then for the top thickness of the arch of the bridge, I'll draw some parallel lines going towards the left. So all of the lines going leftwards are roughly the same direction. So they're not quite horizontal at the horizon. They're leaning a little bit at an angle, but the angle's the same for all the lines going towards the left. And when we draw the underside lines of the bridge on the left, when they're nearer, they're further apart, and for an arch further away, draw these lines closer together. as they're at a distance. Next, we could draw some upright posts for the side part of the bridge. And then repeat them on the left-hand side of the bridge too. Again, these sorts of lines will be getting closer together and thinner as they recede away from us. But if they're on a larger structure, they'll start large, but then again, as they go away from us, they'll look smaller. If you'd like to learn more about basic perspective, please consider joining one of my online drawing courses for beginners. You can find more details at circlelineartschool.com. So we can draw more vertical lines on the near side of the bridge, matching up with the lines that we drew on the far side of the bridge. And then we can repeat these vertical lines at a distance, getting smaller and smaller as they recede. The vanishing point is a very far distant point, so we don't want the bridge going all the way to the vanishing point, because the space between the left-hand side of the bridge and the right-hand side of the bridge is a big space, but the distance between the right-hand side of the bridge and the vanishing point, that distance is much further spatially, but in the drawing it's shorter. So just be mindful of that when you draw in one-point perspective, that if you have a shape continuing too close to the vanishing point, it's going to look like an enormously long shape. So we can still make this bridge look like it's a large bridge, but it stops quite far away from anywhere near the vanishing point. The next step is to darken some of the lines. Once you have darkened the lines, we can consider what to put as the area outside the bridge. So on the right-hand side, I'll draw another line parallel to the baseline, which is already on the right, just to sort of block off the height of the land in relation to the bridge. And then we could double up some of the lines on the bridge. So the more intricate details we add to the bridge, the smaller details will make the bridge look larger. So this near side curve, I'll double up that line and consider adding some tonal shading to it as well. So you don't really want to add the shading too much at this stage when there's still some details to add to signify the scale of the bridge. Because the bridge is symmetrical, whatever shapes you put on one side of the central line of symmetry, it's probably a good idea to repeat them on the other side of the line of symmetry. And then perhaps we could add some lighter lines going downwards from the pillars of the bridge to indicate a reflection in the water. So lighter lines, just less pressure. And then we could add a few sketch lines for a simple landscape in the background. Now, the horizon line represents the eye level of the viewer, but the hills in the background are higher than the eye level of the viewer, and that's why they're above the horizon line. So now I have the basic shapes and the basic background. I think on the right hand side I'll add an area of rocks. So I'll just sketch those in first, getting a general feel of where we could place the rocks. And that will give some solidity on the right hand side. And then we could start to add some shading to the drawing. I just start by using the side of the pencil, some soft mid-tone to the tonal values of the water going in the direction of the river. So by making the shading going in the direction of the flow of the water, that will hopefully help the sense of flow of water. Quite a still image, so I don't want the water looking like it's flowing fast. So it's just a gentle sort of flow. So you could smudge the tonal values that you have just with your side of your hand or a soft eraser, just to smudge the tonal values. And then add more. So shading and tonal values, I think generally it's best to start off quite light and then make the tonal values darker over time, rather than start with very dark tonal values. Now, underneath the bridge, because I know I want that dark at the top point of the underneath of the bridge, and then graded gradually to lighter as it goes lower, we can start at the top part of the bridge very dark, because I'm confident I want that dark. But in other areas of the drawing, if you're not sure what tone you want, start with a mid or mid-light tone, and then decide how much darker the drawing tells you that it needs to be as you develop the other areas of tone within the drawing. So drawing tonal values is very much considering how one area of tone works in relation to another area of tone. It's not really advisable just to look at a tonal area in isolation. That's why it can be quite difficult to add tones to a line drawing at the beginning. But as you add more tones, then you can become more confident of which areas need to be dark and which areas need to be light. And it's always fine to use an eraser, lighten an area, so you are drawing with the actual eraser. But at this stage, I'm just darkening areas and starting to use tonal values to explain some of the shapes and some of the qualities of light that I want to create within the drawing. Now, with the double line thickness that I put on some of the areas of the bridge, if we darken those areas with the side of the pencil so they're really dark at the top point, and then they peter out a little bit below the top point, then next we can add a slightly lighter tonal shade below this very dark line, so it looks like a graded line, dark at the top and then going for the shades of grey and then becoming white of the paper below. And again, anything you do on one side of the line of symmetry, it's a good idea just to add it to the other side. So this is starting to pull the drawing together tonally. I think the top sort of walkway of the bridge, that could be a tone perhaps. But if I change my mind, I can just erase that tone because it's very lightly applied to the paper. Now on the right hand side for the rocks, I think I'll give the structure like a wall, so that needs a flat tone to make it look like a flat embankment wall, and that tonal value can go into the shading of the river. And now for the rock shapes, I think I'll just sketch those in straight away with 2 or 3 tones, so dark tones, blocks of dark tones, blocks of mid-tones, and maybe leaving some tonal values, just the white of the paper, but later on I'll probably get rid of those tones too. And as I go along, we could just draw in the reflections of these rocks and stones within the water as well. So I think the rocks could increase in size above the edge of the top level of the bridge and then go down into the water. So to make the rocks solid looking, try to simplify the tones and don't make them too subtle, because you can always add subtlety later on. It's better, I think, to have the basic solid structure at the beginning. And just have in mind that sort of idea of using just 2 or 3 tones, light tone, a medium tone and a dark tone. So over time, you could get a big block of stones and rocks on the right and then their reflection. So now I have a range of tonal values in the right hand side corner of the drawing. it's starting to come together a little bit. I think it still needs some smudging, and perhaps it's time to consider what to do in the landscape. So first of all, I'll use the 4B pencil that I'm using. Any sort of soft dark pencil will do, and use the side of a blunt pencil just to sketch in some of the basic tonal values of the landscape. Now, to make it a sort of atmospheric landscape where it's paler in the background and darker and higher contrast in the foreground, I have the rocks and the tonal values in the foreground, which are high contrast, so they're going to look like they're closer to us, the viewer. And then I'm building up these soft tonal values in the background, and they will, just because they're soft tonal values, they will naturally look like they're further away. So if any of the shaded areas that you're drawing are too defined, just use the side of a razor to blend them out a little bit, and then keep going. So at this stage, the drawings are looking a little bit more like we can envisage the sort of the quality of the light or the weather on the scene. And that hopefully is because most of the drawing is in shade now, that it's becoming a tonal drawing rather than a line drawing, which is what it was before. Now at this stage, I think it's sort of vital to try to see how each of the parts of the drawing work together, and if one of the parts of the drawing doesn't work so well, it's best to try and judge that in relation to how that bit works in relation to the rest of the drawing. So there might be something that doesn't work so well in a small part, but it sort of helps the whole drawing work and therefore keep it in. When using perspective, the first lines of a drawing are really critical to understand and to make work. But over time, you can have a lot more freedom in your drawing to decide how you want that basic structure to look by adding tonal values which create a quality of light and mood to the drawing, to thinking about how you want edges to look, how you want different areas to feel different by using the pencil marks in different ways for the hills and the landscape, or the details of the bridge, or the rocks, or the water. So just little subtle differences of how you apply the pencil marks to different types of texture within the drawing. Those different illusions of texture within one drawing will all work together, hopefully, to create areas which have a different feel to them. So basically, I think this drawing is finished. Generally, a drawing is finished when I can't see what else to do. And then sometimes it's quite good to use an eraser and simplify a drawing if you find that you perhaps pushed the drawing a little bit too much and did too much to the image. It got a bit too busy. So try to find a way towards the end of a drawing of simplifying it rather than adding too much finicky detail. Try and find ways to simplify your drawing so that it creates a sort of mood and style that pleases you, that you wanted to capture in the first place. So I hope you found that drawing technique useful for your own drawings. Again, if you'd like to know more about how to join my online drawing courses for beginners, please visit circlelineartschool.com. Thanks very much for watching, and see you next time.